What can these insignias from high-powered machines of a past era possibly have in common with one of baseball's all-time legends? Just ask Reggie Jackson, one of baseball's greatest power hitters, a man that has hit more home runs in most situations than any other player. He'll tell you those insignias all add up to big dollars. Today, Reggie Jackson tells us about powerful mountain motor muscle cars. We'll also hear the tragic story of a fire that destroyed much of his valuable car collection. Here on the Superchargers.
The Superchargers, a fast-paced look at the professional and showbiz side of automobiles and more. You're in the driver's seat with cars and stars as we amaze, amuse, and entertain with unique car stories and more from around the world.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Superchargers. I'm Jan Gabriel. Over the past 8 years, we've traveled to a variety of museums here in the United States and seen some of the most beautiful automobiles in the world. Well, today, a very special treat, as we take an exclusive look at a very unique private collection of muscle cars and rare motorcycles, owned by the man that the sports writers nicknamed Mr. October, because of his performance as the deciding factor in 5 World Series championships. Our guest today is none other than the one and only Reggie Jackson. Reggie, you're a baseball legend, but this program is about automobiles, and I know that you've got a passion for cars. How'd that all get started?
Well, I think I'm just like most American people, Jan, especially the baby boomers from 35 to 45, and I'll be gracious since I like you and push you in that group. But I think that everybody, especially American, loves the American automobile, and I guess foreign automobiles as well. When I was young, being from a small town, like most of the people in the country, we didn't have a heck of a lot to do except maybe play hide and go seek. But after you got home, you sat on the front porch and enjoyed the summer evening. And who was going to win the ice cream for the night was the guy that my father said could name the year, make, and model of a car, whether it was a 57 Dodge Coronet, or whether it was a 57 Chevy Bel Air or Impala. We didn't have a Bel Air at that time, or 150 or 210. You were the guy that came up with the most for the evening was the guy that wound up winning the 3-4 scoops of ice cream, and that's what I did.
So you made a game out of it?
Made a game out of it, and I enjoyed it very much, and luckily when I got to playing baseball and grew up, I got a chance to buy some of the cars that I loved. When I was in high school, I went to a pretty wealthy high school, and I was one of the poorer kids in the school, and couldn't afford to buy some of the things that the other kids had. They had new fuel-injected Corvettes and 64 421 lightweight, 63 lightweight Pontiacs and stuff. Sure. I had a 55 Chevy, and that really is my passion automobile, or my favorite automobile today. It was maroon, a 327 with a 4-speed.
You had another maroon car. You had a maroon Pontiac that, in your book, you talk about that car.
The maroon Pontiac came from a guy that most of us know, a man named Charlie Finley. When I signed my baseball contract in 1966, I got a $94,000 bonus, 8 semesters of college education at $2,000 a copy, and a 67 421 Catalina with a 4-speed. Something I'll always remember.
Reggie has probably 100 or more cars, and his specialty is muscle cars, probably the premier collection in the world. Now, there's a lot of folks out there wondering just exactly what is a muscle car. Perhaps Reggie can tell us.
First off, when you say the word muscle cars, you're talking just that. A car with a kind of horsepower that could dominate any drag race. These were American-made cars with big, high-performance engines in a medium-sized body and chassis. Some engines were Hemis, named for their head design. 1964 through 1972 is considered the muscle car era. In that span of 9 years, GM and Chrysler developed most of them. Yes, Ford chipped in, and also some of the American Motors cars chipped in with their Javelin, of course, the GTX. There was the popular Chevelle, first built in 1965, a Z16 with a 396 block with 375 horsepower. And there were a number of other cars that have become real classics. And one of the biggest successes of all time were the pony cars, starting with a 1967 Camaro. Yes, the Mustangs and the Boss 302s were in there as well. And you could get it with a big block engine. And a spin-off of the Camaro came out in 1969. The ZL1, the Copo car, the Central Office Production Order. It came with a 427 all-aluminum engine. They only made 69 of them. Some of these cars worth well over $150,000 today. Insiders say, along with a gas crunch, skyrocketing insurance, and too many accidents were what made the muscle car history. Now, nearly 20 years later, they're a treasured commodity to the car collectors. Even an average muscle car can command a price of $8,000 to $10,000, which is twice what they cost when they were new. Some very original cars in excellent condition command prices upwards of $20,000 to $50,000, and yes, it can go higher. There are special rules to remember about muscle car collecting. Finding one with its original engine and parts is rare. Many of the high-performance engines blew up and had to be replaced, and anything that changes the original car takes down the value. The thing to look for is the build sheet from the factory and the first bill of sale, even the window sticker if you can get it. The more documentation you can find, the better, the more value the car. Muscle cars are going to go up in value all the time, but be careful. There are a lot of counterfeit cars out there. Not too long ago, a collector paid a cool $250,000 for a 1969 ZL1 Camaro. Now that's what I call money in the bank. There you have it, Jan.
Well, that certainly tells us a lot more about the muscle cars. Now, Reggie, of your collection, let's start right here with this Chevelle.
Well, Jan, you were kind of busting my chops a little bit earlier about 1964 being the year of muscle cars when it all started, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But if you want to do that to me, then I've got to bring you to the Chevelle Z16 car, which was a 396 car, 375 horsepower. They made 201 of them. The reason they made 200 is because you had to have at least 200 production cars in order to qualify for racing, any kind of sanctioned racing, whether it be NASCAR or whether it be drag racing or whatever. Let me let you look at the hood here. You see all the big motor underneath the hood, and of course this is restored to bring it back to the most value I possibly could. But just one of the things on restoration, Jan, this emblem right here cost over $750 looking for it for several years and finally picking it up, buying it at a swap meet.
About the same time, what did Ford have to offer?
Ford had something, let's move over here. Ford had something in 1965. Of course, they had the Thunderbolt, which came out in 1964 in the Fairlane car. But as we move along up to 1965, that year there, they had a 65 GT350. We don't have one here today. But along that same line, they had what they call a Boss 429 Mustang. We were talking about the pony cars before. They had a 302. But this one here was a limited production car. They made a little over 200 of them in 1969. Only made this car for 2 years, 69 and 70, called the Boss 429. Now and there you see it.
This car's a little confusing. This has got hemispherical heads, Hemis.
Yes, it does. This is one of the Ford products that came out with a Hemi motor. And when you talk about Hemis,
Mopar.
Everybody thinks about, of course, the Mopar.
Sure. Now, Ford also made some mid-size cars that perhaps Grandma and Grandpa would buy, but had some big motors in them.
Yes, they did. Let's move over here right next to it, Jan. This car here is what they call a Fairlane. This is a 1966. This is a year when they made a few more than they did in 1967. 67 was a year where they made even less of production, but this was really built for racing, this car. This is called an R car. R car meaning dual 4-barrel, 4-speed, and a lot of horsepower, 427 cubic inches.
Reggie, one of the cars that really appreciates in value is the convertible. I know I've seen a few around here.
Well, Jen, what they say in the business is when the top goes down, the price goes up. Come on over here and I'll show you a couple.
Well, certainly a beautiful example here of a convertible, but what makes it a muscle car?
Muscle car, to me, means big motor in a small-bodied car. This is a B-bodied car, Satellite GTX, and this car won the Mopar Nationals in 1987. I'm really proud of it. It's got 11,000 original miles. It's a 4-speed Hemi convertible, and it's a Plymouth. We all recognize when we pick that hood up.
Now that's what I call a Hemi engine.
Exactly. 11,000 miles. I have done some restoration work on this car. This car came out of Texas. The thing that makes this car so valuable, Jan, is the fact that it's a 4-speed car, it's a convertible, and they made 10 of them.
Limited edition.
Limited edition, and some of those cars were 4-speed. So I've got an either smaller number as far as how many they made. Only 10, and even 3 or 4 of them were 4-speed cars, so that's why it's so valuable.
Reggie, you seem to specialize a lot in limited edition cars. I notice you've got some more over here. Let's take a
sure
look.
do. Yanko Chevelle and a ZL1.
Now, Reggie, I know this is a Yanko Chevrolet. I know back home in Chicago, we had Nicky Chevrolet. These are kind of limited edition cars from dealers, weren't they?
You're right. There were a few dealers in different parts of the country, and I'm sure the people that are watching today, each little area had its own dealer. In the New England area, the eastern area, there was Baldwin Chevrolet. They had the Baldwin motion cars. Then in Pennsylvania, of course, there was this guy here, Don Yanko Chevrolet. Chicago had Nicky, and California had Dana Chevrolet. And all those cars have great value today.
Another car worth big bucks is this. This is another limited edition Camaro automobile.
Absolutely. This is the daddy of all, the nostalgia piece of all pieces, and really one that every collector that is any kind of a muscle car collector loves to own. The ZL1 Camaro.
They made about 70 of these?
They made 69 of these, and there's probably 35 to 40 still in existence.
And I know where 3 of them are, right here in Reggie Jackson's collection. Well, we said earlier that the muscle car era was from 1964 to about 1972. Reggie Jackson would have an argument with that. Of course, I don't know if you want to argue with Reggie Jackson, but you do have a little input there, and you say that the cars perhaps really started to flex their muscles a little bit back in 1957.
I think the factory started back then, Jan. Chevrolet came out with a horsepower per cubic inch with a 283 in a fuel-injected, full-bodied car, which was the Bel Air, just like this one here. This is a dual 4-barrel car. It's a 270 horse, but they made an injected car just like that. Ford, of course, had the 312 Thunderbird, and Chrysler had its 300 series with the 300 D, E, and F. 1962 and 61 is when the factories really got involved, and the Beach Boys came out with this car, I want to say, or at least emphasize it with a She's Real Fine, my 62 409. A 409 cubic inch, 409 horsepower, dual quad car, and they started putting lightweight front ends on these cars. Ford had its 406, 405 horse, and of course in 62, the Mopar factory, Chrysler, came out with a 413s with the Cross Ram. Then, of course, in 1963, they started coming up with the factory experimental car. The class was called AFX. We move over here to the Ford, where we have a whole lightweight front end, aluminum bumpers. Chevrolet did the same thing.
Fiberglass
Dodge
hood.
Fiberglass hoods, fiberglass doors, and they lightened the car up to make them go fast because they felt that if they won the races on Sunday, they could sell the cars on Monday.
All right. Before we end this segment, there's a little area over here I'd like to show you. Reggie?
All right, let's take a walk.
In his lifetime, Reggie Jackson has faced adversity on many occasions and conquered it. Proof positive of that is his 5 World Series championships. But there was one event that took place in 1988. It was the fire and destruction of 34 of his most valuable automobiles. How did you get over that, or have you yet?
I don't think I've gotten over it yet, Jen. I still think I cry inside every time I think about it. I was real fortunate where God has allowed me the ability to continue to produce some cash and continue to give me my health where I can go out and work and replenish some of the collection. I bought 20-some cars from a guy in North Carolina named Carl Dwiggins. He helped get my collection back.
So Reggie Jackson, indeed, when it comes to his cars, is for real. But he's also for real when it comes to something else called motorcycles. And we'll tell you that side of Reggie Jackson when we return in just 2 minutes and 2 seconds right here on the Superchargers. We're back on the Superchargers. I'm Jan Gabriel. Our very special guest today, Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. If Reggie has a passion for automobiles, that certainly is paralleled by his love for motorcycles. How'd that all get started?
Well, I guess I've always loved motorcycles, really, Jen. I had a Bonneville Triumph back in 1966, and I had a Norton in 67. Consequently, I stopped riding motorcycles when I was playing baseball, and I'd say the last 4 or 5 years, even a little bit longer, probably 6, 7 years, got involved with Harley Davidson, was involved with the offering they had when they went public back in 1984, and Malcolm Forbes was there as well. And I probably collected 10, 12 Harleys, lost a few of them in the fire, but still enjoy riding a Harley Davidson. Then the last 3, 4 years I got involved with sport bikes, the Kawasaki and the Yamaha, the Suzuki, and just really have enjoyed it. In fact, I was just the Grand Marshal in 1990 down to Daytona for Speed Week. and enjoyed watching the 200 and really enjoyed it just about as much as I possibly could. Anything. Looking forward to possibly even hooking up and getting involved in a race team. But I love the thrill of motorcycling, and of course I try to emphasize safety and skill of riding and things of that nature.
Now, you talked about the Harley and sort of gave us a little parallel to the Japanese bikes. I'm assuming you find the Japanese bikes perform a little bit better.
They're incredible with speed, they're incredible with handling, and they stop so well. I am a firm believer that they run so fast. They run 160, 170 miles an hour right off the showroom floor. So I'm a firm believer of wearing proper attire, meaning helmet, gloves, and leathers. In fact, some of the gloves I wear have studs in them with leather jacket and leather pants if you can, but boots, riding gear. And then learning how to ride is very, very important. I've been very fortunate that one of my good friends writes for one of the magazines, a magazine called Cycle World, and I've spent a lot of time with him on the racetrack and just taking different rides on the windy roads where you just have so much enjoyment. You get out there and you're free, no phones, nobody can bother you, and I've just really enjoyed it. And I think it's important to learn how to ride. It's important as getting on it and being a macho man and spinning the tires and twisting the throttle. That's easy to do.
When you were in baseball and you were hitting those dingers, in your book you described the feeling of the power. Do you get can you relate that power somehow to riding motorcycles?
I certainly can. It can relate it to cars, and you know, with all the horsepower in a muscle car, and I believe that you could call the super bikes muscle bikes, really, for lack of a better term, because some of the power in the motorcycles, if you don't stay down on them when you're at full throttle, they'll pull the front wheel right up off the ground. So there is a tremendous thrill. There's a tremendous rush, and I think what you have to do is almost be afraid of the bike, respectful of the bike, and therefore, if you do that, then you'll understand how to handle it a heck of a lot better.
Reggie's also a historian when it comes to motorcycles, and I believe you've got a little something to tell us about the inception of the motorcycle.
Let's get to it. The famous German inventor Gottlieb Daimler built the first motorcycle in 1885, and it must have taken real guts to climb aboard this strange contraption for the first time. Daimler's teenage son, Paul, volunteered to take the risk on November 10, 1885. He wheeled it out of his father's workshop and took it down the road. It was a bone-shaking ride, if there ever was one, for about 7.5 miles. But history was made and the motorcycle industry was born. Fortunately, for everyone who loves riding motorcycles, there have been a lot of improvements since then. Now high-tech machines are designed with specific purposes in mind, and these competitive road racers are built for speeds of up to 130 miles an hour and more. Lean the wrong way, and you're out of action in a hurry. I can attest to that. Hill climbing events like the famous Widowmakers that's held every year in Utah demand a two-wheeler that can handle a 72-degree incline. These bikes have unusual stretch frames and an assortment of the weirdest looking rear wheels you're ever going to see anywhere. Speedway bikes have a different set of problems. They actually race sideways and in very close quarters. The rider needs the skill and balance of an acrobat. You literally have to turn right to go left, and one miscalculation can cause a chain reaction and bam, a crash. This dangerous racing is called flat tracking. Riders need to be savvy and think fast. The pressure of the pack is always just behind you. Of all types of motorcycle racing, the one that's toughest for both equipment and rider is motocross. Of course, you don't have to race to enjoy the excitement of riding a motorcycle. More and more people of all ages are discovering how much fun it truly is. Who knows? Maybe by the year 2000 and beyond, we'll all be riding motorcycles. Maybe they'll be like this one, the futuristic lean machine.
Reggie Jackson, you've been blessed with a really exceptional life. You've had 5 World Series championships. You have a car collection that you dearly love. You have good friends. You're a businessman. How can you share this with the young people of today? What can you pass along to them?
I would say if I was young again, I would try to do my best to try to read good people around me. Surround yourself with a good team, if I can use that term. Consequently, I was around a great team all the time in my baseball career, so people think I'm a great baseball player. I think you can be a great person in life if you surround yourself with God and good people.
All right. Reggie Jackson joining us today here on the Superchargers. I'll be back with a final word in just a couple of minutes. Reggie, thank you so very much.
Thanks, pal. Enjoyed it.
Mr. October. We're back with just enough time to thank our very special guest here this afternoon, Reggie Jackson. I'm Jan Gabriel for the Superchargers, America's #1 motorsports entertainment television series. Hope you'll join us again next time.